Why, hello there. So, who was it? Little Billy on YouTube asked me, Ramsey, what about these thin bag gloves? Are those any good for hitting the bags with? And my answer is, yeah, I love these things. A lot of people like to use the big, thick boxing gloves, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're gonna fight with them, you might as well get used to using them on the bag as well. But as far as thin bag gloves with little or no padding, man, I love these things. Why? Because they help you articulate your punches a whole lot better. I'm a big fan of gloves with no padding at all, just leather with a solid grip bar. These are a little different. They have a tiny bit, just a tiny bit of padding and a slightly plush, squishy grip bar. But what that grip bar does is allows you to align the knuckles. I don't know if you notice this, I'm not wearing any wraps underneath. Some people might freak out about that. What? You're not wearing wraps underneath your gloves? Well, you know what? All the boxing greats from back in the day trained with thin bag gloves. They did. Guys like Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, Jack Dempsey, Rocky Marciano, all these guys trained with the thin bag gloves. And, man, there is an excellent video about this. If you love boxing history, go check out the video on bag gloves. I will put a link down below from the late, great punch professor himself. Man, if you want to know the whys and the wheres and the hows and the whos of thin bag gloves, go check that out. But to answer Little Billy's question, again, I love these. Also, one of the big differences between these and regular boxing gloves is your thumbs are free. And so you can actually articulate a genuine, real fist. Whereas in a boxing glove, like a competition glove, the thumb is out here somewhere and you can't close the fist completely. Something like that, right? And so you end up punching. Now I'm not closing the hand here. You end up punching like this. And if you try using two knuckle contact, like, you know, with the two big knuckles, you'll end up jamming your thumb and you can break your thumb and it's all kinds of bad news right there. Which is why I would recommend in big, thick boxing gloves, aim with your ring finger, which might sound very counterintuitive and strange if you're used to two knuckle contact, but yeah, these give you the freedom to use either two knuckle or three knuckle contact. Now, you can use these gloves, of course, on all the bags. The light punching bags, the heavy punching bags, the double end bag. They're easy to put on. And if you know how to articulate your fists and your wrists the way you should, it's no big deal. If you don't, you might want to stick with the wraps and the big gloves for a while. But when you put these on for the first time, probably go light. Probably work with the smaller moving bags like the double end bag and the speed bag, just to get used to these first and get used to articulating your hands and your wrists in the right direction. Here's what I mean by the wrists. When we make a fist, I'm going to curl my wrist slightly. Not like this. I'm not going to wrist lock myself. That would be stupid. I'm going to bend my wrist slightly down so that my metacarpals, that's the bones in the hand, are directly aligned with the bones in the wrist, right? Because if my hand is like this, in that natural position, what happens when I make contact with a hard surface? I wrist lock myself this way. We don't want the wrist to bend and hyperextend, so I'm going to curl it so these muscles are slightly flexed, so my wrist stays in that position. So make sure no matter what type of glove you're wearing, your wrist is doing that same type of work. And when we get used to articulating our wrists that way with these light, thin bag gloves. Then, doing it with the big ones with the wraps on, easy work. Let's move over to the speed bag for a minute. I love the speed bag. It's going to make a lot of noise. Bear with me here. Now, you don't need gloves at all for the speed bag, but if you skin up your knuckles, thin bag gloves are definitely very helpful. So what holds a lot of people back from training as much as they probably should is some really simple things like skinning up their knuckles. There was a new guy came into the gym the other day and he used some of the loaner gloves in the back, old ones, and he'd never punched before. And he did the thing every new student does, punching too hard, too soon, with no wraps or anything on, and an old crappy pair of gloves, in spite of the fact that I'm telling him, go very light until you get used to the motion. Just go through the motion, just touch it at first, right? There's no urgency for power when you start. Nobody listens, and he didn't listen, and so afterwards he takes off the gloves and he's like, Coach, my hands are all skinned up, in spite of the fact that he had the big fat gloves on. So, man, get used to articulating your hands correctly before you even think about applying any level of power. Power is not the most important thing in striking. It's position. Position wins fights before power does. If I have the most powerful punch in the world and I whiff it at the air, who cares? It does nothing. If I get that perfect angle and I throw a 50% punch, it can knock people out and lay them out flat. Right? If I have the perfect angle and I throw a 100% punch here, but my wrist is not aligned correctly, oh no. What just happened there? I've just injured myself and I can't punch anymore. Right? So do it right. Start light. And then, when you become confident with your technique, you can start to add power. Anyway, another thing I love about thin bag gloves, you can get them cheap. Now you can spend a lot of money on them if you want, but you can get them cheap. These ones cost me five renminbi. I kid you not. That's less than $1 in American money. But yeah, you can buy expensive ones. You can buy brand name ones. You can buy, you can spend as much or as little as you want on these things. But one of the great things is they're cheap. And if they're not cheap enough for you, guess what? Our friend Jack Dempsey, in his book Championship Fighting, which is great, and you can read that for free online if you're one of those poor kids who can't even afford a book. If you've got internet access, you can read that for free online. Just look it up. Jack Dempsey, Championship Fighting, Explosive Punching and Aggressive Defense. And what does he do in that book? He teaches you how to make your own bag gloves if you're too poor to afford your own. Because the primary purpose of the bag glove is to prevent the skin on your hands from breaking, so that you can hit something, so you can scuff your hand over and through a target without skinning up your knuckles. I don't know if you notice what I'm doing right there. In this particular punch, I'm hitting on the edge of the bag and I'm following through. Essentially, my hand is sliding through it. We won't always do this, but sometimes we will. because we're going to do that on a chin, right? We're not going to stop on the chin and pull back. We're going to go through that and then back. Sometimes we'll hit and then come back, right? If we're aiming for something down the center, the nose, the heart, man, that's a underutilized target. But if we're going for the side of the chin, find a part of the bag that emulates that. And this is a great bag to emulate the chin as well. Uppercuts, right there. Hooks. Shovel hooks. But anyway, as I was saying, the thin bag gloves allow you to put in a lot more work and get a lot more punching than you ever would bare knuckle. A lot of people tell me, well, I don't train with boxing gloves on because I don't want to get used to habits that I wouldn't use for a bare knuckle fight. Okay, that's great in theory, except the fact of the matter is you're probably not doing enough punching if you're only punching bare knuckle. Whereas if you wear a glove, even a thin bag glove, where all it's doing is preventing you from skinning up your knuckles and ending up with bloody knuckles, and what's wrong with that? That means you can't put in another round the next day, or the next, or the next. You gotta wait for your precious little knuckles to heal first, so you don't bleed all over the place and get infections. And then you can't train. You can't get out there and train. And that's a shame. That's a travesty. Ooh, don't let that be you. So as I always say, get out there and train. And if you don't want to get used to the technique of punching with the big fat boxing gloves, get yourself a pair of thin ones. It's cheap. It's good for you. It allows you to articulate the hands precisely, to choose whether you do 3-knuckle contact or 2-knuckle contact. And that's about all I have to say about it. Besides, thanks for watching. Now get out there and train. Do you ever have trouble landing your jab? Sure, we all do. So what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what. You get yourself a rash guard with a camouflage left sleeve so he will never see it coming. My left hand is now virtually invisible. Can't see that, can you, Shao?
No, where's the left hand?
I know, right? Camouflage sleeves from xmartial.com. Go check them out. They'll never see you coming.